Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. I'm pleased to welcome Dan Blanchard to the broadcast. Dan is the Chief Technology Officer of Intercontinental Hotels Group, or IHG. He's held that role for a bit more than 2 years. And his responsibilities include traditional IT, delivering what he calls tech-enabled possibilities, as well as organizational change. He began his tenure just before the pandemic hit, and I look forward to hearing more about how he and his team navigated their way through these difficult times. I also look forward to his perspectives on how technology will enhance customers' experience in the future and a variety of other topics. Dan, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Dan, you are the Chief Technology Officer of IHG, the Intercontinental Hotels Group, and have been for a bit more than 2 years now. And most people who are listening to this probably have some familiarity with IHG. As somebody who yourself has worked across different companies in travel, talk a bit about some of what makes IHG different in that space.
Yeah, sure. Just to get to sort of set the foundation, IHG is a hospitality company. We have 16 brands, a little over 6,000 hotels. Brands like probably most recognized for Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, but also, of course, Intercontinental Hotel, Kimpton, Indigo, Crown Plaza. You know, it's a suite, a pretty comprehensive suite of hotels. And you're right, Peter. I've been in the hospitality and travel industry most of my career, and IHG is one of the great companies in this business. And I joined 2 years ago to take on this Chief Technology Officer role at a time where we were sort of launching the next generation of IT capabilities at IHG. Pretty quickly, about 5 weeks in, the pandemic hit, and so that did change my trajectory a little bit. And we can talk about that, but as we go on. But yeah, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, hospitality companies, and almost all of the hospitality companies are at their core management and franchise organizations. And so most of the hotels, in fact, the vast majority of the hotels that we have within our 16 brands are either franchised, and so they're run according to our standards and quality controls and processes by those owners that own the physical assets, or they're owned by those owners and we run them for those organizations. And so we're management and franchise predominantly across our 16 brands.
And talk a little bit, if you would, the Chief Technology Officer is such a diverse role. If you speak with 5 CTOs, you'll find that they have 5 different sets of responsibilities. Talk a bit about your set of responsibilities at IHG.
Sure. So yeah, you're right. I mean, you get a lot of answers when you look at what the position descriptions are across CTO. My accountabilities really bridge into three areas. The first is running the technology ecosystem. And so that's, and all 3 of these have a vision component, a strategy component, and a plan component. And that sort of pattern might come out pretty commonly or frequently as in this discussion, because it is something I believe pretty passionately, of making sure that those 3 elements are tightly connected. But all three of these have those aspects. But the technology ecosystem, so running the company on the technology that we use, whether that's establishing the direction for us as an organization, making sure we're looking around the corners in terms of what's going on in the IT industry, all the way to keeping systems up and running and running cloud solutions and those kinds of things. So that's sort of the first aspect of my accountability. The second aspect is one that is now starting to come into play, and the reason that I say that this way is because there's a process of building trust with the rest of the business environment, with the rest of the stakeholders across the team. And so this sort of technology-enabled business possibilities is an accountability that I have. So bringing to the table what is possible, even if it's not being requested. And again, that's sort of transitioning from order taking to charting the course and thought leadership. But that's the sort of the second accountability, is bringing those technology enabled opportunities to the table. And then the last one is organizational change. And we've done a lot of things. When I first joined, we're a very traditional IT shop. Realized through several things, not the least of which was the pressures associated with COVID, that we had to be a little bit lighter on our feet. And so some of the organizational changes that we've made have accomplished that. But my accountability is making sure that we as an organization particularly contribute to the broader IHG management ecosystem, that we contribute from a technology perspective in ways that enable capabilities. And we'll get into that probably in a little bit, but organizational structures, platform structures, moving from project-based models to product-based models, those kinds of things is an accountability that I have for the organization.
That's a great overview. Thank you for that. Well, you alluded in the early stages, some of the complexities early in your tenure, that you joined, again, a little bit more than 2 years ago. And within a few weeks, COVID, the full extent of COVID began to make its way through all industries, with a particularly acute, sort of aspect to it for travel generally, for hospitality more specifically as well. And so talk a bit about those early days and some of the pivots that were necessary, at a point where you would normally probably be going off and visiting different sites, different locations, meeting with executives in person, getting your footing under you as you're developing your first plans. No doubt you needed to actually be very resilient and nimble in the way in which you operated with so much that was unknowable. Take us back to that time, if you would, and how you charted it.
That was an exciting time, and I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, because it was challenging. It's been a challenging time in the hospitality industry over the course of the last 2 years. But I started the job just like everybody else does, with a 90-day plan. Actually, I had a 120-day plan because I didn't think I was going to be able to get it all done in 90 days. But at about week 5, that got thrown out the window. The same things that you would normally do, all of the assessments and making sure you understand where you stand in terms of capabilities and all of those things continued. But really quickly, the key capabilities were making sure that we ran the company effectively. So just sort of blocking and tackling basics, making sure that we didn't lose traction or cause problems during this very difficult time. We had owners and operators of hotels going through terrible situations. And so we had to make sure that we in IT didn't exacerbate or cause any concerns with that. So that was probably job number one. And then shortly thereafter, of course, economically, we had to react to a significant downturn in business. And so cost savings and efficiency became really, really a key capability. And going through that process, whilst having aspirations to really accelerate the capability, build additional capability within the organization, was a bit of a challenge. And as I said, I think it was at about my 1-year anniversary, so about halfway to where we are now, I told my boss that I had completed my 120-day plan, and so he was actually pretty pleased with that because we did obviously do a lot, but it did change quite dramatically the trajectory of the first year and the second year, to be honest. But the focus was on efficiency, making sure that we were making really, really smart decisions with our money, that we didn't spend money on things that were maybes. We didn't spend money on things that might work. We really had to know that they were going to work. And so that was the start. And then, all of the foundational thing, everybody across the industry knows, ITIL discipline, CMDB, resiliency management, ensuring that everything was there, ITIL, incident management, change management, all of the basics, the foundations of running a good shop we had to do. Fortunately, we also made some really good progress with things like CI/CD pipelines, started our move from a Gen 1 based cloud environment to a Gen 2 based cloud environment. So we've been able to make some progress in that space, but it has been dominated by, the realities of the economic position that a hospitality company is in.
Yeah, that all makes sense, certainly. And I wonder, what was the role you mentioned? Technology during the course of the pandemic had a primary role, for instance, in identifying cost savings and efficiencies. You wanted to make sure that IT was not part of the problem, that it was not a blocker during a time when there were a lot of exogenous factors that were becoming blockers to business, of course, and so ease of doing business and so on. It was also a time that for many companies that as they needed to have new digital ways of communicating with colleagues, with franchisees, thinking about that broader ecosystem you have and some of the complexities of the business model that you have, also with customers as well. Talk a bit about the role of those digital channels, how they have evolved, and maybe even how some of them have advanced as a result of renewed focus on some of those channels during these times.
Yeah, and they had to advance. I mean, the reality is they had to advance because the demands from the business was there. And I'll give you a little bit of a window. So when I joined, we sort of had coined the term, no vendor left behind. We had a lot of solutions in the ecosystem, and we had to pick some. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm cast no dispersions on those vendors and those products that we didn't pick. But at the end of the day, you can't ride all of those horses. You have to pick some horses and ride them. So we had to do that, and we had to very, very quickly convert solutions to cloud-based environments so that they would perform and they were available pretty much globally. We had to do a lot in terms of work from home capabilities, making sure that our contact centers could operate from home, and that's again globally. Making sure that our corporate staff could work from home and could collaborate without the, if you will, sort of safety blanket of their phones on their desks and all of those kinds of things. We made some decisions in terms of how we were going to configure our office space that we had to adjust to. And so a lot of work to make sure that we didn't lose traction. And I would say that we have done that very well. I think, our company has decided to do this hybrid work environment, and I endorse that. I think that's the right way to go. I think it's probably difficult to be really innovative if you're not meeting with each other and getting in rooms and collaborating. And so now that we're able to start getting back in rooms and do that, I think it's a good mix. Running the business, doing the transactional things when it's appropriate, and then building relationships and getting in the same room and doing art of the possible kinds of discussions. It's sort of a really good mix. But all of that had a technology enablement component, and so we had to work really hard and really fast. We had some really great partners that helped us with that really hard and really fast to make sure we met the business needs. That was a little bit of sort of throwing into the deep end, right? Making sure that we were there, but it actually did go very well.
That's great. I would love to circle back to this kind of art of the possible or the launching of the next generation of capabilities, as you noted. Some of this, of course, was, again, making its way into your strategy in those first 5 weeks, but had to be put on hold. But it sounds like now progress is being made anew as time has gone on. Talk a bit about some of what you see in terms of what some of those next generation capabilities might be.
Yeah. So let me I'll give you a picture, because some of it's a little bit basic, right? It's sort of making sure that we're continuing on the journey. And so if you look at the forefront of what we're trying to accomplish going forward, one is continuing to mature all the processes that we've built. And I'm not talking about processes for process sake. I mean, very, very focused on making sure processes, any large administrative organization's got to have some processes, but they have to help the organization as opposed to become administratively burdensome. So continuing that journey, continuing the journey of getting sophisticated automation, so that we're not banging on keyboards and making mistakes and those kinds of things. Continuing our ITIL maturity. I mentioned before, we have a Gen 1 sort of cloud. It's a hybrid cloud where we've got most of our processing done in a completely virtual cloud-based environment. But moving that all the way to a Gen 2 cloud with a fully expandable and contractible in an automated way, almost autonomous. Moving that direction. And so a lot of these just sort of fundamentals of IT and working through those capabilities. And then on the next set of capabilities are really starting to enable or accelerate our capabilities. We've had safe, agile practices for a long time, so we want to continue that. But these CI/CD pipelines that fully automate the process of getting something from the development environment into production. And we've built a set of automation. Some folks did some really great work in that space, even through this whole pandemic. Very proud of the team for doing that. And it's deployed. Some elements of it are deployed to about 70% of our application suite, but the full end-to-end that really is the secret sauce with all the testing capabilities and that whole thing that really drives great quality measures is only deployed to about 25% of our applications. So we've got a lot of work to go in that space where we're enabling the company to have an idea and put it in production is accelerating that journey. And that's those are two really pretty big focus areas. And then the company, right? And I'm not talking about IT, but I mean the whole company has a mission to improve our customers' experience, and our customers are a bit of a diverse set. So let me talk a moment about that. So obviously, our customers are folks who stay in our hotels. Clearly, we want to delight and build the capability, make sure that those folks have a great experience with us when they're using our products. But our customers are also our owners, right? And so they're running hotels, and so we have a very strong partnership with those owners. So we've got a lot of projects, just like most people, most of those projects are making sure that they're ease of use. So mobile is important. Making sure they're enabled with good data and analytics. So we're integrating all of that pipeline, all of the information that we know about situations and customers, and making sure that those insights are actionable. Both those digital interfaces as well as those interpersonal interfaces at the property, and making sure that we're running the company as efficiently as we can. We're doing things with robotic process automation. We're doing things with a little bit with machine learning and doing that kind of stuff, and we're making sure that those sort of competitive advantage related capabilities to delight our guests and support our owners are maximized in terms of what is important to them. One of the great things about IHG is, they're absolutely, the whole company is absolutely laser focused on impact. So when we look at an opportunity, when we look at a challenge, when we look at an investment, spending $1 to make sure something is better, it is very, very focused. Will this create value, create customer love? Will this create a great experience by our customers? Will this create a great capability for our owners to run their hotel better, to make sure that they're better prepared for the guests that are coming in? They're better able to recognize and support the frequent customers that come to our hotels. So the IHG is and I won't compare it to any others, but I'm truly impressed with the amount of focus there is on that decision making. We don't have a lot of folks with pet projects. We don't have a lot of folks with turf wars or any of those kinds of things. People collaborate and make good decisions that maximize those two things.
That's a great overview. I really appreciate that. I wonder also, as you think about, moving ahead and continuing to think about next generation capabilities, building on what you've described, what are some of the methods you use in order to gauge trends and their potential relevance back to IHG, Dan? What kind of an ecosystem do you curate, or conversations you put yourself in, or members of your team who are, more or less responsible for these sorts of things? Talk a bit about the methods you use just to be aware of what the art of the possible is from your perspective.
Sure. A good part of my time is assessing what's going on in our industry and other industries. IHG we're not an R&D kind of IT ecosystem. So I'm not going to compete with a Google or an Amazon or those kinds of companies in terms of the ability to come up with great ideas. But there are great ideas that I can leverage of what they're doing in the bottling industry, or what they're doing in the food service industry, or what they're doing and so building an organization that cares about that is really important to me, and participates in those kinds of models. One of the things that we can't have, and my team will tell you this, we can't have this sort of not invented here methodology, right? We have to be open to great and innovative things that are being done outside of the walls of the IHG environment. And there's a couple of ways that happens. In a very standard way, we have a preference to buy versus build. So there's that preference. Now, obviously, you can't do that in all cases, but prefer to buy versus build. We prefer to rent versus buy, right? So if we can do a cloud-based solution, software as a service based solution, I'd rather do that than buy it and host it myself. So we have that kind of capability. We've reached out and built an ecosystem of partners that can help us think through this thought leadership. So all of the what we call strategic partner relationships have an innovation component in that. So we built that directly into our contracts with them. And so they provide innovation resources. We use those funds and that thought leadership to incorporate changes and updates into how we're doing business. And we've also just recently started, and one of the leaders on my team, Chad Westfall, has really championed this, is interacting with universities. And so we have a good relationship with Cornell, who, as most of you might know, or some of you might know, is a premier hospitality university. They have a curriculum that's fantastic in that space. And so we're interacting with them. We're working with Georgia Tech on similar things. And we have other tentacles and relationships with others to bring some of that sort of thought leadership. And so the good thing about those relationships is one, it's relatively inexpensive. Again, I'm not going to compete with, my R&D budget isn't going to compete with Google or Amazon, but in that space, I can throw out ideas of we built a program in the leisure space, right? This combination of business and leisure, and how do we as a business market to and adapt our services to address those kinds of needs, and other things like that. And so that sort of ecosystem brings in those ideas. But I will say that the number one thing in that space is to build a culture of people who are willing to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, and we have to partner with organizations to get that kind of innovation in. So it's a combination of all those tactical things plus that very clear culture to be open to those ideas.
Really great. Are there, as you think about trends that are exciting across the next several years, especially in light of some of what you've described in terms of your process and your diet as it comes to, absorbing some of these insights, what are some things that particularly excite you?
Talk about diet. I haven't cracked that. I can tell you that. I'm working on it. Yeah, sure, sure. But there's some really exciting things that are going to change the way IT is participates in the world. Um, Obviously, it's been meteoric rise in terms of the digitization of the business model, and that's not about to change. We're not at a plateau in any way, shape, or form. And so the kinds of capabilities that we're now seeing in the gaming industry or in the augmented reality or the virtual reality, it's gonna pretty dramatically change the way people interact with typical business environments. So you think about the metaverse. You think about all of the, whether you call it metaverse, you call it the Generation 3 cloud. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's going to change the way people interact with business models. And so an organization like us, what we do is look at where the pain points are. So when you understand as much as we understand about our customers and you understand as much as we understand about our owners, you start thinking, okay, well, what are those key pain points that exist in these interactions? You can envision somebody who's planning their vacation, right? And they're spending a lot of money on planning their vacations. So how can you take some of these augmented reality, virtual reality, potential machine learning kinds of things, interconnected worlds, socially interconnected world? How can you apply that to deal with that pain point? And so we're looking at those kinds of options. We don't have the answers yet by any stretch of the imagination, but by combining this, what's going on in the industry with some really, really cool capability, and looking at our pain points, we're coming up with areas where we say, hey, we need to look at that, because that piece is a real pain point for someone who's trying to, like I say, plan a vacation that they might take once every 2 years, and wants to maximize the value that they're getting out of that spend for their family, for themselves, what have you, maximizing that without just sort of hoping that it's going to be a great time, right? They want to know that it's going to be great. So combining those kinds of things is what's exciting to me. Now, I'm not about to tell you that's coming out today, right? I mean, this industry has to mature. But one of the things that's really important about my charter, and I mentioned it before, is all of the decisions that I'm making today. The different technology vendors that I'm selecting, the technology models, architectural models that we're picking. Those models have to not only have a view to solving the problems that I have in front of me today, but I can't put myself at a disadvantage for 2 or 3 years out when these other capabilities are going to become possibilities, and I want to take advantage of them, right? So I don't want to have to turn 180 degrees when I get there. So I call it mental gymnastics, but you have to think through all of these things that are happening in the industry. And when I say the industry, I mean the IT industry. And think about all of these needs in the hospitality, travel, lodging space, and really think about what that's going to be, so that again we don't put ourselves in a technological debt-based disadvantaged position to do those things out in the out years. And that's taking a lot of really disciplined thought leadership work.
I appreciate that overview. I wanted to also ask you, Dan, as you think about your journey to becoming a chief technology officer, or now a leader multiple times over at major organizations, Delta, Marriott, before this one, Boeing. I wonder, if there've been certain difference makers in your rise, and especially in light of, if you had advice for your younger self, or maybe advice for a younger colleague who might wish to follow in your footsteps. What's been sort of, your kind of the secrets to your success to some extent?
That's a great question, and I spend a little bit of energy thinking about this because none of us have really. I'm sorry if anybody says they're done and they've stopped learning. They're probably wrong, or at least I would argue that they're wrong. And so, but there are some key things that I think are really important to be successful in IT in particular, probably more broadly, but at least in IT, because we are a service, right? We are service within a business, or at least that's my experience, whether it's Boeing or Marriott or Delta. We are a service within the business. And so one of the key things that I have found it very, very important to do is think through the challenges of those business people and put yourself. So there's an empathy related aspect to this, but it's more than that. It's actually thinking through what are their challenges. It's not about what the challenges are of IT. If you start from the IT perspective, you're probably going to miss the boat. So if you start from their perspective, it becomes a lot easier to understand how you might be able to meet their needs or challenge. So it's a frame of mind. It's a if you will, again, we're back to some of those mental gymnastics, but it's doing that work to make sure you understand where they're coming from, rather than sort of pushing your agenda, right? If I go into the room and I say, well, we're doing a CI/CD pipeline, and you also just, come into line. That typically doesn't work that well, right? But if you go in the room and they say, you know what, our big problem is we've got a cycle time from idea to implementation right now that's 9 months long, and that's not fast enough for me to capitalize on these opportunities. I've got to make it 3 months. Okay, then you can start reacting to that and figure out how you as an organization as an IT organization can help solve those challenges. So again, it's just sort of turning the tables and getting into their shoes a little bit. And then the other thing is, there's just basics, right? Transparency. I will tell you the number of times that I have gotten positive feedback because I've said, hey, it was me. I screwed up. Here's what I'm going to do about it. Make sure it doesn't happen again, right? Can't hide any of those kinds of things. Certainly not in IT, right? I mean, if the system went down, the system went down. Nobody said, yeah, you're crazy. Our website was up the whole day. No, it wasn't. It was down. So, I mean, just being transparent and talking with people and communication, those are the big things. But I have found that ability to put yourself in the shoes of your stakeholders has been probably the biggest key to being able to have an impact in the organization.
Well, Dan Blanchard, thank you for a really stimulating conversation of leadership during trying times, of a story of resilience, interesting aspects of where you see your company and the industry and technology, generally speaking, heading. It's been a really great conversation. Thank you.
Good. Pleasure talking to you, Peter, as always.
Thank you.